Are you a bodybuilder or athlete or just interested in fitness in general, and you've wondered, is it true that sleep is important for optimal muscle function? If so, this episode of Heard Online is for you. We're going to take a critical look at this commonly made claim. But before we jump into looking at this, I want to point out that if you're particularly like a bodybuilder, weightlifter, or really into fitness, check out these episodes, Talking Insomnia number 76 and Talking Insomnia number 101, right here on YouTube. Ariane is a competitive weightlifter and Rob is a fitness coach, and both actually found that they did very well, even if they didn't sleep much, and that when they stopped worrying about how sleep impacted their performance was so much greater. So I didn't want to miss a chance to tell you about those two episodes. Really good, strong interviews there. So with that said, the reason we're doing Heard Online on this today is actually that there was a recent question in the comment section about this. So I want to kind of dive in, and it is not difficult to see why we can get the impression that we need to sleep a certain amount for our muscles to function in the optimal way. If we Google sleep muscle recovery, we get a bunch of hits, and the first one is sleep for muscle recovery, why it matters. That clearly seems to suggest that it matters. We have 6 ways to get better sleep for muscle recovery. We have 7 benefits of sleep exercise recovery. We have a whole bunch of these. And we have this one, how sleep helps muscle recovery and growth. And this is from Aura. And this is, this title, how sleep helps muscle recovery and growth, was the one I used for the thumbnail. But again, what is real here? Like, what is the actual scientific backing of these claims? So to look at that, we want to go to PubMed. If you're not familiar with PubMed, PubMed is a database where scientific studies are found. And so I actually went ahead and went to PubMed, of course, and I put in the exact same search query. So here it is. Can you see it? Yes, you can see it. And we are looking at a review article, but I just want to show you this. Like if you put in this exact same search term, sleep muscle growth, you get a bunch of hits. And the first one didn't seem to be relevant to us, so I looked at the 2 second ones, which seemed very relevant. Particularly this one, effects of sleep deprivation on acute skeletal muscle recovery after exercise. We actually got the entire PDF here, the entire study. This is from Dattilo and colleagues. Seems to be Brazil, a study from Brazil, and this study was actually listed in the original Google search. We just went to Google. This was actually there too. And this is a crossover study. So what they did was the following. They took 10 young men, healthy, who did kind of moderate exercise. They were not regularly doing strength exercises, just kind of like maybe jogging here and there, something like that, right? So it took 10 males, and then they invited them into their lab, and they had 2 conditions. Either they were allowed to sleep, as they typically would at home, the same amount, or they were sleep deprived. And the sleep deprivation condition was as follows. So 2 nights of no sleep. So they were kept awake for 48 hours. And then the 3rd night, they were allowed to sleep again. So they had 2 sleep deprivation nights and 1 recovery night in the sleep deprivation condition. And so that's a 3-night condition. And then there's 3 nights condition where when they slept, as they typically would. And not only did they test or monitor sleep during the 3 nights they were there, but during the daytime, they would check their muscle activity, right? And then people would compare against themselves. They would first come in, let's say, in the sleep deprivation condition, and then maybe 4 weeks later or something like that, they would come back and they would sleep as much as they want to, and they check their muscle strength. So people were their own controls, and that makes for a very nice experiment, because there's not this confounder like, oh, this group was different than this group. No, it's actually the same group. You're testing people against themselves. So what did they find when people were not allowed to sleep for 48 hours? Were they weaker, or were they or not? Well, let's head back into our study and take a look at that. So they used something they call isometric peak of torque, was sort of how they measured muscle output. And this graph is, I think, the key one to look at. And so what do we have here? Well, on this axis, we have 0 to 4, muscle output, how strong they were. And on this axis, we have time. So this is prior to testing conditions. And then this is like 0, 12, 36, 60 hours into the 2 testing conditions. So this would be 12 hours after, having slept as much as they did, without restrictions, and 36 hours later and 6 hours later, or sleep deprived, right? So the darker lines, the darker dots here are the sleep condition, 3 nights, no interruptions, and the gray one is when they were sleep deprived for 48 hours. And just looking at this, just eyeballing this, you see that they're very, very similar. But the question is always, when it comes to scientific studies, was there a statistical significance between the two? Was there actually a difference between the sleep deprived group and the non-sleep deprived group in terms of muscle strength? Or I should say not groups, I should say conditions. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. And we find the answer here. Maximal voluntary contraction. Maximally voluntary contraction, which is like their measure of muscle, effectiveness and strength, demonstrated only a main effect of time, which means that, as we can see if we go back to the graph, there was a difference, when they were tested before coming into the lab and at baseline during the lab. There was a difference between this and this, but there was no difference between the 2 conditions. In other words, sleep deprivation had no impact on muscle output, like, muscle performance. 48 hours sleep deprivation had no impact. And again, every time I find these things, I'm so, I don't know what the word is. I'm surprised is a kind of mild way of saying it, but there's such a huge difference between what we hear in kind of mainstream reporting from the actual findings of scientific studies. Now, you may say, well, Daniel, this was a very small study. There were only 10 participants. And then I'll say, okay, sure, that's very reasonable of you to say. What about a review study? Well, the first one I looked at was actually a review. This is from Journal of Science and Medicine and Sport. It's a review article titled "Inadequate Sleep and Muscle Strength Implications for Resistance Training" by Knowles et al. and Knowles and coworkers. And so this is a very different study. This is a study where they reviewed the literature, and they had initially like 1,700 studies, but they had 17 that met inclusion criteria. And we can just jump right into the results. So what did they find when they looked at the literature on this, like more completely? So 17 studies met inclusion criteria. So they were, they were enough quality to be included here. They were rated as either moderate or weak for global quality. And here we go. This is the finding. Sleep deprivation had little effect on muscle strength during resistance exercise. Right there, the second line in the results section. And when you see little effect on muscle strength in a scientific paper, that means that it was not statistically significant. In other words, they actually didn't find anything. If they had found the statistical significance, they would have said, like, clearly these 2 things are linked. So what did it mean by they said there was, how did they word it again? They said there was a little impact, or had little effect. Little effect means basically that they may have seen kind of a trend, or they may have seen one article that showed something, but the proper interpretation of this, I think, is that it was not statistically significant, so they did not actually find anything. Yeah, we can conclude there, but I just want to point out one more little thing. When you publish a scientific study, it's very hard to get published unless you find something. So authors often look really hard to find something to report on. And you can see these authors, after the sentence, sleep deprivation had little effect on muscle strength during resistance exercise, they say, in contrast, consecutive nights of sleep restriction could reduce the force output of multi-joint, but not single joint movements. Results were conflicting regarding hormonal responses to resistance training. But This phrase here, in contrast, consecutive nights of sleep restriction could reduce the force output of multi-joint but not single joint movements. When I read that, the way I interpret that is, aha, they didn't actually find anything kind of globally on what they were looking for. So they had to really, really mine the data for some condition in which they could find something to suggest. So like not multi-joint, but single joint movements that were not then maybe there was something there. So to me, it's kind of an attempt to say we found something when in reality there was nothing found. So yet again, like so often when we do Heard Online, we find that there is a huge discrepancy between the mainstream reporting and the actual scientific data, which is, I think, in my opinion, so very unfortunate, because in our world, we know that so many people develop a struggle with sleep because they think it is important for some reason. And one reason is often fitness. Somebody thinks, I gotta sleep more so my muscles, so I can maintain muscle strength, or I become strong. And that creates a pressure to sleep, which makes it difficult for us to sleep, of course. So I hope the Heard Online episode was valuable to you. And do know that if you're into fitness and health and exercise, that applies to so many of our students. So many of our students who've struggled with sleep have actually had this interest in their own health and well-being. And we try to put out a lot of helpful information out there, but what can often help is to have the information we put out contextualized for you personally. And if you'd like that to happen, head over to the sleepcoachschool.com, which is our website, and there you can book a call with a certified sleep coach who's had trouble sleeping and left the struggle. You can join a very nice supportive group in our group coaching program, our Insomnia Immunity program, which is perfect if the struggle with sleep has been more emotional for you, because sharing emotions can be, sharing where you're at and sharing your journey with other people can help so much when we are feeling vulnerable and feeling alone. On the other hand, if you're looking for something that is convenient, where you are working one-on-one with a coach and you send messages via text, you can check out our app, BedTyme, which may be perfect for you. So all these options are at thesleepcoachschool.com. And with that said, I'll conclude for today. Look forward to having you back real soon. Bye for now.